Here's what I wanted you to do for this assignment. I wanted you to think of your own experiment. It can be any idea. It doesn't have to be the idea that you're using for your project. It can just be um, any idea that you make up. So maybe, let's say I'm doing this assignment and I decide that I'm doing an experiment on the effect of temperature on memory. So right here I would say temperature on, and then memory right here. I would write those in. And then my independent variable in that case would be temperature. And then I have to pick what the two specific levels of my independent variable will be. Um, I'll write temperature right here, but in here I'll write maybe 60 and 80 degrees if I decide that those are the two levels of temperature that I want to use. So 60, 80. And then here I would just wanted you to write in the sample size that you would use for group 1 and group 2. So it can be any number that you think is you would want to use. Maybe, for example, you could use 50 and 50 or 100 and 100. Um, Here I wanted you to make up your results. So if I'm looking at the effect of temperature on memory, I would have to decide what I think the average memory score of this group would be and what the average memory score of this group would be. And I can just think of, I just need to think of how well would I expect a group um, to do if they're tested in a 60-degree room. And I just write down what I think the average would be. And I think how well would I expect people to do in an 80-degree room. And I would write down what I think the average of this group would be. I just make up two numbers that I think the results will come out to. So if I'm doing an experiment on the effect of temperature on memory, um, the extraneous variables are other things that could affect memory besides temperature. Um, so I could use, um, well, I just need to think of three things. Maybe um, time of day, hours of sleep, and um, one more thing, maybe um, maybe number of calories uh, for number of calories that you've eaten that day, because those three things could affect memory. And it's good um, for me to. It's good if I pick three things that can have um, numbers that I can plug in right here, because now what I can do is if my first extraneous variable that I write here is time of day, I need to choose the time of day that I'm testing group 1 and the time of day that I'm testing group 2. So I could say um, 11 a.m., 7 a.m., or 8 a.m., 12 p.m. If this second one right here is um, hours of sleep, I just write down the hours of sleep that this group is getting and the hours of sleep that this group is getting. So I could do 6, 8, or 7, 9. It's up to you what numbers you want to use. If this one is um, number of calories, I just write down the number of calories that each person in this group is getting. I just make up a number, maybe 1,000. The number of calories that this group is eating, maybe 1,500 if that on the day of the experiment. So just write the names of the three extraneous variables that you've chosen in here, 1, 2, and 3. Like I said, mine were time of day, hours of sleep, number of calories, and I put in a value for group 1 and group 2, a value for group 1 and group 2, and same thing, a value for group 1 and a value for group 2 for all three of them. What I wanted you to do was to make one of them confounded and the other two not confounded. If it's um, if it's confounded, then that means that they're unequal. So, for example, if I put 11 and 7 for time of day, if I put 11 a.m. and 7 a.m., that would be confounded because the two groups are being tested at different times of the day. So that would be yes. But for hours of sleep, if I said 6 and 6, both groups are getting the same amount of sleep, and you would say no for confounded. And for number of calories, if I put 800 and 800, that's also a no for not confounded because they're equal. So I wanted you to plug in any numbers that you want to plug in here. It's up to you what numbers you want to make up for your extraneous variables. I just wanted you to make it so one of them is unequal, and you say yes for confounded, and the other two are equal between group 1 and group 2, which means no and no for confounded. So for one of the rows here, for one of your extraneous variables, make the numbers unequal and say yes for confounded. For the other two, make two rows, make them equal. So equal here and equal here, and then that's no and no. So yeah, I wanted you to make one of the rows, one of the extraneous variables confounded, and the other two not confounded. I also wanted you to when you make your confounding variable, I wanted you to do it in a way that would make the difference between the means of the two groups larger. So if I wanted to confound, let's say I pick time of day as my confounding variable, that's the one that I'm going to make unequal, and I decide how can I make the difference larger? Well, let's say I expect that the group in the 80-degree room over here will do worse, lower memory. The group who I said 60 degrees here will have better memory. If I wanted to make the difference larger, maybe I could, for this group, I could say 6 a.m. for time of day, and this group I could say 9 a.m. So 9 and 6, and then that would be confounded. What I'm doing is I'm making it confounded in a way where the recall or the memory of this group right here will drop even further, and my difference will become even larger. The difference between the 60 and 80-degree rooms, the difference in performance will become even larger then because this group will drop down even further. So for right here, I wanted you to list your extraneous variables. You're just listing them 1, 2, and 3. So that whatever extraneous variables you wrote in here, just write them out again. For confounding variable, write down the name of the one variable that you made unequal between the groups. And that's the name that goes here. It'll be one of these three. Just write the name again. And in this part of the assignment, I wanted you to make it confounded in a way to make the difference larger between the difference between the two groups larger. So this should be larger for the answer. And this says, can you safely conclude that this has an effect on this? Just fill in whatever your idea was up here. For example, mine was temperature on memory. And the answer should be no. And the reason why is because your two groups are confounded. they're unequal with each other on something, which means that they're unequal on something other than your independent variable, which means that you can't conclude that the independent variable had an effect.